Castology.
This is Castology, and I am one of your castologists, Zane C. Weber, here with my not so new castologist anymore. You're one in, you're almost veterans now. To my right,
Harry George Wallace here for second Castology recording.
and diagonally across the desk.
If we're going to do middle names, then it's Brittany Taylor Hetherington. There we go.
No, middle names are our thing.
Well, bloody other side of the table. I see how it is.
I
Your
mean,
name has enough syllables in it without adding.
It is quite verbose.
I
I need to
mean,
marry someone with a short name
The
like
cool
Smith.
kids use a middle name, but the best kids use a middle initial.
I do, yeah. But Harry G. Wallace just sounds like a rugrat for some reason.
G is an awkward one.
It's G. Willikers. It just doesn't vibe.
I quite enjoy that BTH for Brittany Taylor Hetherington almost spells bitch.
Almost, yeah.
And it fills me with joy. Anyway,
So you're here for another round of podcast recommendation and review. Each week we're going to recommend 3 podcasts, each of us recommending one, and then we'll go back and review the podcasts we recommended a fortnight before. So how are we all today?
Oh, doing well. Yeah, I'm here.
I will say we just completed what was a tradition on the last in the last team was family dinner.
That's so cute.
Oh, we're continuing a tradition. That's so
yeah.
sweet.
But you tricked us into it. So
You
now it
all
feels-
thought you were hungry, but no, it was tradition.
It's the plan all along. No, we dug into some dirty Porto Bergs.
My pants are partially unzipped.
It was an intense meal all around, but let's get into our podcast recommendations. So I'm going to start this week by saying I want to hear about Harry's podcast.
Excellent. This week, I am recommending Dungeons and Daddies, not a BDSM podcast.
Hashtag not a BDSM
Hashtag
podcast.
not a BDSM
Double
podcast.
D's.
So, Dungeons and Daddies is probably, I would say, one of my favorite podcasts. I've been listening to it for a long time. 2 friends separately recommended it to me, and then I always get it wrong with which one actually got me onto it. So they both get annoyed at me when I talk to them about it.
So we won't mention anyone.
So
that
I won't-
way you're
yeah.
not going to get in trouble.
Diplomatically, I'm not mentioning any names. Shout out to you, Cinnamon and Ella. But yes, Dungeons and Daddies is wonderful. It is a real play D&D podcast, but it is the most fun and ridiculous of them, I would say, if you're a D&D aficionado, such as Zane and Brittany.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably something we should warn our listeners about now is like,
Oh, this
It's
podcast
happening.
is getting nerdier.
I used to be the sole representative of the Dungeons and Dragons fandom, and now this is very close to becoming an actual play Dungeons and Dragons
Now you
podcast.
have my sword.
Yes, my name is Harry George Wallace, and I am a level 8 rogue. It is. It's real play, but it's very digestible to people who aren't D&D. It's more of a comedy podcast than anything else, and it follows a through storyline, which is very, very good. And they focus more on the story than they do the actual role-playing elements of it. And it's by 4-5 comedian/writers who are all wonderfully funny. I don't think there's ever been a full episode of it that I haven't laughed out loud at least once.
Okay.
Cannot recommend it more highly. What else is there to say about it?
I would like to know where the daddies comes from.
Oh, yeah, I should explain that bit. Yeah, like the actual context of the podcast. That might be useful. It is about 4 dads who drop through a portal into the universe of Dungeons and Dragons. So 4 dads from our world who are doing their own dad things like coaching sports teams and helping their kids. And
Maybe
their kids,
some people have that experience with their dad, Harry, but try not to
I mean,
generalize.
couldn't comment, but that's what else that would be like. He's coming back from that cigarette run any day now. So their kids get lost in the Forgotten Realms, which is where all the Dungeons and Dragons things happen in canon. And then these 4 dads go off on a quest to find their lost sons in Dungeons and Dragons world. So they're just kind of wandering around this fantasy realm while they're still dads, but they also get the powers of the people who play D&D. And it's just a fun juxtaposition. And it's an all-round good time, and that's where the daddies come from. And every time it is on the podcast, it does say not a BDSM podcast, except for the one time that it was indeed a BDSM podcast.
I guess my next question is, so it's about fathers and sons. Is it family friendly?
No.
No.
Decidedly not.
Right. It's adult humor.
It is indeed
Yep.
the adult humor. Yes, if you are a baby, hats off to you for listening to this. But also don't listen to Dungeons and Daddies.
I will put it on the table that I have listened to this before. I haven't listened to every episode. I jumped on it at the start, and then due to time constraints, I had to pick podcasts to leave my feed, and this was one of them. But yes, I look forward to reviewing it with all of you next week.
Mm-hmm. What do you have anything to say, Brittany? You've been quiet for an uncharacteristic amount of
I
time.
was being respectful. I know. I've got that awareness of it's like, Brittany, you speak too much. Make sure you come up for air. Is what I was currently going for.
Oh, that's cool. Well, I guess we'll just move on then.
No,
No.
I really.
I guess we'll just move on. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I quite enjoyed it. Much like I said previously, I like a storytelling format. I like being read to, and it seems to fulfill that kind of criteria. So I'm excited
I'd say so.
to delve into it a bit more and form my opinions.
Should we declare what our class race combination is
At the moment,
in Dungeons and Dragons? Yeah, at the moment.
Like one that we play regularly?
Yeah, sure.
I'm into it.
Or the most memorable, I guess.
I've got mine for sure.
Sure.
Am I going first then?
Yeah, absolutely.
I volunteered.
You're
myself.
very confident.
I dobbed myself in. So my favorite character that I play is a tiefling, which if you're not a big D&D head, is
thought you'd go for that one.
a demon person. Yeah, Britt knows exactly the character I'm talking about. A demon person tiefling. They are an arcane trickster rogue class.
Okay.
And their name is Fred.
Sure. I mean, I would say, like, I don't want to cast aspersions here, but that's a pretty gay character.
Oh, I think he's more of like a Captain Jack Harkness character where he like
sure.
transcends sexuality.
Yeah.
No, I love Fred. His name is actually an acronym for like a big demon. It's like Fred Rogue, Regulus, and Julius, and it's like all of them, but it's Fred altogether.
Nice.
I've had some fun times playing Fred.
What about you, Britt?
I'm currently playing Malik Westbrook, which is basically water, the name, like multiple times. So I had a lot of fun with that.
Moon. Oh my god, were you guys on the internet for Moon, or is this a
No.
very obscure? Yeah, Zane's nodding. Excellent. Okay,
I'm going to have to ask afterwards.
very obscure reference, but continue.
Yeah. So I'm playing a Triton. I guess my class is technically sorcerer, but it's a bit of a homebrew in that basically I'm from Avatar and I can waterbend and it's a good old time. But with a mixture of Storm from like X-Men. So I've still got some lightning or like Sith vibes.
That's fun.
Very fun. Because I've also got a Triton. A trident. I am a Triton. And like a net, so it's kind of like Colosseum. I throw the net, electricity.
Gladiatorial.
Ooh.
Yeah, very fun.
That
And
is fun.
I have a frog neck, which I use for storage, and when I'm distressed, it goes.
Oh,
That definitely sounded more like a pigeon than a frog, but I'm not going to judge.
Thank you so much. It's my original character, and it can be any way I like.
Oh, absolutely. That's what D&D is.
Yeah. But also, I keep claiming that I have yet to drown a man because I realize I can breathe underwater, and that will be my attack move one day. Anyway, I got way too excited then. Thanks for asking.
I love it. Zane, tell us about your character.
I play a little frogman, a grung rogue, who's most homicidal most of the time. Yeah, and he just wants to be the boss, and no one really wants to let him be the boss because he's little. But
It's Napoleon syndrome, man.
yeah, I mean, he doesn't
dreams.
really. He's an outlander, so he doesn't really understand social norms. But so he just kind of goes along and kills people when he feels appropriate.
What a life.
Yeah.
Do repercussions happen? Like, I guess he's a frog
absolutely.
person. but-
Yeah. The thing about grung though is you can't touch them without getting poisoned. So,
So he's one of those like
so people
yellowy
are-
black frogs. or
Yeah,
something.
people are hesitant to slap him.
I love that. Shall we pivot before we lose anyone who's here for sports?
Yeah, I think now we move on from the nerdery. Well, we don't have any sports for them this week, so
No,
I'm
that will
very
probably be a
sorry.
running theme, I think.
I can try and expand, you know?
Yeah, it
Give
would
the
actually,
people what they
it would be
want.
very fun for us to review sports podcasts.
Yeah.
Come to think of it.
So let's move on to my recommendation. So I'm recommending Strange Air. Now, this is an audio fiction podcast, fully scripted, full cast. It has about 10 episodes, but every second episode is like 2 minutes long. So the full episodes and then kind of a little episode, like a little extra bit in there.
So
I'm
don't get
so
fooled.
excited.
Don't get fooled
Yeah.
for
And Strange Air follows the investigation into the disappearance of the host of a radio show called Strange Air. And the investigation is being done by his now grown daughter. I'm not going to spoil too much. I haven't listened to all of it yet. But
Is there a lot?
There's only 10 episodes. So, and the episodes are about half an hour long. The big ones are, and then the small ones are between 1 and 2 minutes.
So it's also finished then too.
Yes.
I would, but
I believe they are working on a season 2.
Yes, I did see that because when I saw you were recommending it, I did a quick old Google and it said they'd greenlit season 2.
It's comforting that there's a conclusion to the first season, though, because anytime that there's, I guess there would be a cliffhanger if there's a season 2. But
well, it could be another investigation or it could be an investigation into something else. Fingers crossed. I don't know how it ends yet.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy this. It is very kind of late night radio vibes, which I really resonate with.
I love that. I'm very excited about this.
The rest of the audio is non-eidetic, so kind of
Ooh, fancy film words.
So
I was
you're
speaking a
listening
different language.
I know what it means.
to conversations that aren't necessarily being recorded for any reason other than this is an audio drama. But there's late night radio, which is obviously being recorded because it's late night radio, and there's personal recordings that you also hear. But but also it's not very produced. There's not a lot of music or effects in this. It's not a Q code production, so it is kind of understated in how that goes. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and I hope that you all do too. I think this is I'm expecting this to be an easy win. After last week's recommendation,
hard sell, easy win. That's the pattern. You got to bring them back in.
I'm quite excited.
Me too. This really resonates with me as well. Like I'm a big fan of the whole like Americana late night talk show, cryptid X-File kind of feeling. So I'm here for it.
Absolutely. So let's go on to a strange recommendation from young Brittany.
Yeah, I tried, hey. Bring your podcast to work day, and I made a choice. Anyway, so I had chosen the Midnight Gospel podcast, not realizing, idiot, dumb, that it is actually a derivation of a different podcast.
The Duncan Trussell Radio Hour.
Never met him.
Yep.
Never met him.
I hardly knew him.
Yeah, no, just because I realized that it must have been recorded through some sort of, I guess, audio-only format when I originally saw it on TV, because there's actually...
so you found this on Netflix?
Absolutely, yeah. I was drawn in by the colourful art, and I quite like it because it tells very different kind of stories. I guess, kind of like you mentioned before, it is a bit like stoner talk, kind of casual, calm vibes. But I quite like ASMR, not the weird like shit where it's like, "Hi, I'm going to cut your hair today. My God, you're gorgeous." Those ones freak me out, but like just random like squelching noises or just like easy tones, etc. I find quite soothing.
I love how random squelching noises is the less strange one of those options to you.
I swear it is. I've heard some weird stuff in my search. I guess maybe a more normed one is listening to rain.
Yeah.
It's nice, consistent sounds.
Does that count as ASMR?
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. You learn something new every
You're
day.
a freak too.
Yeah, here we are.
ASMR is anything that incorporates subtones.
I thought you were like spelling out the acronym then. It was like, really? The first letter's anything?
No, let's get nerdy audio into it. Anything above your regular hearing range or below your regular hearing range, you can still hear and feel in your body, but you don't register it as sound. So it can bring on a feel of like spooky or transcendence,
Some bone conduction or something happening.
Yeah,
so
so
like
like
where the brown note comes in. Is that?
not really.
That's actually my favorite ASMR.
But like if you walk into a church, the echoes actually are generating, your walking generates infrasound, which makes you feel like you're connected to something bigger than what you are. That sort of phenomenon.
I knew it was all a trick.
ASMR doesn't trigger for everyone. I don't get triggered by ASMR. I don't get that feeling, but yeah.
I was actually introduced to it at work, and they were like, "Look, some weirdos listen to this stuff," and I was like, putting it in my ears, being like, "Yeah, freaks," and then I went and immediately went on YouTube and continued what I was listening to.
So,
yes, back on topic.
Yeah, so Midnight Gospel is a Netflix show.
Yes.
Which takes audio from Duncan Trussell Family Hour, not Radio Hour, sorry, and kind of takes excerpts of that which are particularly existential and that sort of thing and puts it to animation. Now, there is a playlist on Spotify called Midnight Gospel Podcast, which takes the full podcast from Duncan Trussell and puts them into that were used for Midnight Gospel and puts them into a playlist for you all to listen to if you wish.
I find it a nice kind of wind down after a long work day, like a glass of wine, maybe, I don't know, knitting or playing a video game in the background, but you can just kind of let it soak into you.
And just some existential stoner talk.
Exactly. Yeah, what's not to love?
Yeah. I mean, I could just hang out at any party from my early 20s if that's what I wanted on.
But they've cut. Oh, I guess they do ramble.
No,
actually, I was going to say they finesse it, but I was like, that's a lie.
No, it looks really interesting. I'm very keen to dive into the Midnight Gospel. I also like the name a lot.
Yeah,
It is a very. It's different to every other Netflix show I've ever seen. I will say that. And the Duncan Trussell it's one of those shows where some episodes are really good depending on the guest, and some episodes are just Duncan Trussell ranting about turkeys for half an hour.
That's relevant to my interest. Just random.
Well, you win
shit.
some and you win some.
Yes.
The mother one's quite interesting too.
Yes.
If you want to pick one.
Yeah. Okay, well, those are our recommendations for this week. Let's go back and talk about politics again, which was our first podcast as a new group of castologists.
What is it?
But we
good
can't
for?
talk about the election because I'm still processing.
a lot of things. Yeah.
Also, we really don't know what happened yet because, we record in advance. But
I was being sneaky. I was trying to let us get away
Oh
with
my
it.
god.
something you'll
Time
come
is
to
a
learn
construct.
about me is I am radically honest.
I love that.
I don't care about your feelings. I'm going to tell you what's happening. Conservatives. So
I'd like
let's
to omit myself from this narrative.
so let's talk about our recommendations from last episode. I would like to let's sandwich. What would you like to do? Talk about the one that is radically different to the rest, or talk about the rest first?
Let's do the rest first.
Rest.
Okay. Well, let's talk about Harry's recommendation, which was no silly questions.
Why not? Yeah, so I recommended No Silly Questions because I think it's a good jumping off point for anyone who wants to get more invested in politics. And the way I've justified this to friends of mine is that there was a tweet that I saw a long time ago that was, if you want to be into politics, the people who are into politics are the people who own all of your shit. They are the people who are benefiting from it. It is your local members, it is the landlords, it is the people making use of negative gearing and franking credits. So get more into politics. Take the power back to the people, is my philosophy. No Silly Questions is a way of doing that. It is a good resource. It really breaks everything right down to basics. And I'm very interested to hear what you thought of it. It's a very, it's not a complex podcast. It's pretty...
It's literally about making things simpler.
Yeah, it's what it says on the tin. Yeah.
I like podcasts that are a bit easier to digest, I suppose. If I could learn to speak, that'd be amazing.
Digest?
Digest.
Digest.
I'm sorry that you don't have such a broad vocabulary like me.
That's incredible. I learn every day.
Just squeaked past vocabulary there.
I'm a speech pathologist. Help.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah, gosh.
Speech pathologist.
Blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's the worst when you're on a phone too and you're like, hi, I'm Brittany and I'm the blah, blah, blah.
I'm Brittany Hetherington. Try saying that with a speech impediment.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's why I don't go by that name at work.
Anyway, continue.
Sorry.
Yes, tell me what you thought.
When I heard it, I was like, is that the exact same woman from my podcast? So we did choose
our podcasts are very
various
similar.
stuff, which I thought was quite charming.
Yeah, that's cute.
We went for the same thing.
It's a nice little coincidence, like you both coming in for the first time, and you're like, this pertains to me.
Absolutely.
Listen to it.
And as somebody who would have many silly questions, I'm actually a big believer in the fact that there is such thing as a silly question. I do that every day. But
it's mostly, what's Britt doing here?
why?
It's the silliest question I ever ask.
It's, in what context, sorry? I'll just
whenever you turn up.
Hello, let me into your house. I quite like something that's easy to digest and explains things because I don't have a great awareness of politics myself. I'm slowly upskilling in that area when I realize that it is, important, but I do. I like being able to eventually learn more about that. So I think enjoy it.
This sort of podcast that has the end date and going like the publication said we see this need. People are asking questions about this particular thing. Let's help them because again, like political really like engagement in Australia is pretty low.
Yeah, considering we have compulsory voting, that's a problem.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's the thing. I am aware that I'm not super schooled up on it, but I always upskill when it's time to vote, but then I
Yeah.
immediately forget again, and then I have to come back and
And
do
I
it
think
all
that's
over
a really,
again.
really common thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's the selling point of this is it's a resource that people don't have to feel ignorant that they don't know what they're talking about, where they can listen to something like this and go, oh, so that's how the Senate works. Or like, oh, that's why I would vote for a smaller party that can't technically be voted into power. But yeah, and I think that's because they're dealing with with small questions and they're small episodes. I think that's kind of the glory of this podcast, and the fact that it does run a short period of time. So if someone comes to you with questions saying like, so I just can't get my head around why there's so many smaller parties now. What's going on? Or what's the difference between the two major parties? You can go like, well, I can tell you, but this podcast, just go listen to it and it'll cover everything in like an hour that I could tell you in a couple of days.
And it's very beneficial, I suppose, because it's easy to get caught up in the idea of paying attention to the party as being the person at its head, as opposed to actually deconstructing that.
Washington system versus Westminster system. That's hard to say.
We're just
Westminster system.
giving ourselves tongue twisters today.
Thanks to Oporto.
Sponsored by... no, not at all. Non-affiliation.
You did actually have, a jalapeno edible? That's not what you call it.
Jalapeno popper.
Jalapeno edible.
Yeah,
That just sounds like a bad
cool.
time. Brittany's
that might be why.
podcast, Circling Back, is very similar.
Was very similar.
Very similar, but perhaps more of a conversational style. I like that because it feels like I have friends.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is definitely more of the style of podcast that I would listen to for fun, where it's two people talking to each other and explaining things to each other, whether or not they actually know it and whether or not that's a facade. This is definitely something. This is how I learn, is by talking to people, and that's how I like to learn things from podcasts. This one is a bit longer. I think that's the main difference, is that the episodes are about 30 minutes. I felt that they didn't declare their own political leanings
I didn't
as
notice myself.
clearly as No Silly Questions did. So they're definitely trying to be more, let's straight down the line, just give the information. To be fair, No Silly Questions did try and give Scott Morrison an interview, and he was not available, and therefore the other parties only are the ones that got interviewed.
Which is a bit of a shame.
And that's not their fault. He was probably in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Stop it.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's all I have to say. They're of production values, they're very similar. They're both very easy to listen to. I think they both very much meet and succeed at what they set out to do.
100%.
I imagine age range too, it probably would be more situated towards people in their 20s or
they've both got a young
early
vibe.
30s.
I mean, the host of No Silly Questions, Billy Fitzsimons and Tom Crowley, hopefully I'm pronouncing both those right. Billy is definitely of the younger generation. I'm pretty sure she's a 20-something journalist. And Tom is very much your super approachable and very talkative, but very much the older white male journalist. I'm making assumptions, but I think they're safe.
That sounds good for contrast though.
It is 100%, and it is good to have that mutual dialogue, and they get on, like the banter's good. So yeah, it's good times.
Awesome. So those are good podcasts to listen to if you want to learn more about Australian politics. Let's go to the commie podcast that I recommended.
I was about to say, and then there was Zane.
So this is presented by a British person. I'm not sure if he still lives in the UK, but it basically covers working class around the world and movements that have happened in the past and how they inform the rights that we have now and how we can take lessons from them moving forward. So this was dry, and I did warn you about that, and I threw you in the deep end with the Zane Dry podcast right off the top.
It's all right, I brought water.
So what did you think?
Look. No, I think I had a slightly easier time of it than Britt did, but I can do a dry podcast occasionally. Like I can do a little bit of hardcore history with Malcolm.
It's really happening.
What's his
Dan
name?
Carlin.
Dan Carlin. And I can do a little bit of revisionist history with Malcolm Gladwell. That very much like that style of just a presenter talking at you about information. This one, for some reason, I found more difficult to absorb.
Yep.
And I started with the first episode, which was a mistake because the production value was much lower, and I switched it off after about 3 minutes. But then I went to the most recent episode, and it was slightly easier. I found the content interesting, but not enrapturing.
Yeah.
I'm glad it exists because there was some commentary about how they're building a community base of historians, and I really like that. And their whole philosophy of empowering people and like effective socialism and that kind of stuff is very cool. Just not my particular cup of Earl Grey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, there's contention around if whoa. Anyway, there's some contention around things like auditory processing disorder in terms of there being a UK and a US definition, and also if it's an actual viable diagnosis in general.
Ooh, the speech pathologist is coming out.
Oh, yes. Well, they say it's often contributed by other factors, including language comprehension difficulties. But enough about that. If it did exist, then this podcast is now the test for that.
It is the beep test of
Exactly.
auditory processing.
Yeah, I actually had a lot of trouble actually even hearing the content because of the tone. I like an English accent. Who doesn't? Even if it's a bit more broad, I quite enjoy English accents. But I just only got every couple of words or so because I just couldn't concentrate and make sense of what was being said. So it might have been amazing, but I don't know what happened.
No, and that's totally
valid.
fair.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we have 3 different people on this podcast to kind of say, what was your experience with this content? I will say this Zane dryness, I do need to be in a particular headspace to enjoy consuming it. But this is very much definitely a very efficient way for me to absorb knowledge. This sort of like, here is what happened on April 1st.
See,
No
I
extraneous
need my
information.
knowledge to dress me up and take me out to dinner first.
Yeah. Yes.
I need to be seduced into knowledge.
And this one has no interest in making you like them. They're like, here is the details, here's the data. And while they definitely approach it from a very leftist perspective, they also there's not a lot of emotional language pushing you in that direction. It is just kind of like, this is why these people did this, and this is the part of the political spectrum that they sat on, and that sort of thing as well. So even though it is very biased, the information isn't presented in a biased way, which is something that I appreciate.
Absolutely.
Because that also makes me turn off really quickly.
And it's hard to know if you're actually, I guess, hearing a true story, if it's just told through this, a certain lens time and time again.
Yeah.
So that's quite refreshing, even though I have no idea what was said.
You can just assume it was good.
Yeah, I trust you.
Well, look, I did like fact check a couple of their episodes just to see like if their references checked out, and it all checked out. So
Due
I'm
diligence.
happy to
Love
trust them
that.
now. Well, that's the thing, when you're presenting like a history podcast, and particularly a political history podcast that's very heavily biased in one way, you want to check that they're telling you the truth.
I guess things being written from the perspective of the victor as well, it's a challenge.
Awesome. Well, those are our reviews for our political week from last week. Let's go back and just back announce what we recommended this week. Let's start with Harry.
Dungeons and Daddies. Hashtag not a BDSM podcast.
Yes, daddy, yes. I really hate the daddy thing, but
You're using it. What did you recommend, Britt?
ironically. Do you remember when I kept calling you daddy as a joke because you hated it as well? Anyway, that's enough. It was your nickname for a while in my head.
Okay.
I suggested the Midnight Gospel podcast, which is apparently a lie, and it's actually called Help Me Zane.
It is called the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. And if you want to look specifically just for the episodes that are used in the Netflix show, there is a very convenient playlist called the Midnight Gospel Podcast on Spotify that it doesn't just have the audio used, it has the whole episodes that audio was taken from. So yeah, that is available on Spotify for you. And I recommended Strange Air, which is an audio fiction about an investigation into a disappeared radio host who was hosting a paranormal spot on a late night radio.
What doesn't kill you makes you stranger.
Oh, shut up.
Close.
All I
That
was thinking
close.
was smarter, better, faster, stranger.
Stranger. Our heads work in very similar ways.
On that note, if you want to get in contact with us, reach out to us on our socials, or if you have a podcast that you produce and you want us to listen to, or if you're a fan of a podcast that you would like us to listen to, you can submit that either over our social feeds, or you can go to our home on the web, that'snotcanon.com/castology, where there's a handy dandy form for you to fill out. Until next time, I've been Zane Z. Weber here with
Brittany Taylor Hetherington.
and
Harry George Wallace.
keep listening to podcasts, everyone.